Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If you can take your seats, please. So I hope you enjoyed the morning sessions and enjoyed the lunch and took advantage again of the networking opportunities and the chance to meet new people and hopefully even do a little bit of business. This is the final session, and again, once again, we're very pleased to have been able to put together a fantastic panel. In front of you, you'll see the evaluation forms. These are very, very important to us. You can fill in the evaluation form on the app as well, but you know, if you're still used to doing things the old-fashioned way, the papers in front of you, your opinions are really, really taken very serious by us. So please complete them, except for you, Dennis. But if you can complete the evaluation forms and give us your thoughts on the conference and ideas, very importantly, ideas for the future. So please take the time to complete them. But I'm very confident that we've got a great panel here, so maybe wait till the end of the panel, or you might even give us even more positive remarks on the conference as well. So this panel is leadership in the digital era. So what we've decided to do is get some millennials on the stage this time around in the digital era, and to share some of their thoughts of what leadership means for the digital age. Starting from the panel consists of, from this side, nearest to me is Matthias Schulz, Director of North American Material Planning and Logistics for Ford. Sven Damani, next to him, the Principal for Advisory Services for Ernst & Young, and Adam Pieniaszek from the Senior Logistics Manager, North America for Magna. So we've got a car maker, a parts supplier, an independent consultant who can rip them both to shreds, hopefully. So I'll start off with, it is a Q&A. Obviously, I've got some questions to start off with, but we really want it to be interactive. It's interesting that a logistics conference full of logistics experts, and one of the big issues is cube utilization, how we've managed to spread everybody throughout the whole room. I think if this was a truck or a container, we'd all be in trouble. So my first question is kind of on the digital age, and I don't know, I suppose that the very sentence itself, or that phrase, digital age, is a tough one. But I wanted to ask the panel, and maybe start with Matthias, is can you think of any successes, recent successes, using or having that digital age mentality? So using the different tools, different ideas, and some successes that have come from thinking in that kind of way.
Okay, maybe I start with a title. I think it should probably say "Aged Leadership in the Digital World."
Aged leadership, yeah.
I think that probably describes it better what it is, because obviously, I think probably all we panel members are not necessarily the generation that will really implement these changes.
But you have to lead it, though.
We've got to lead it. I think obviously there's new technology out there. I think about track and trace, and you can these days you can track and trace everything and everywhere in the world. And one of the opportunities we've recently implemented is that we fully control our supply chain as far as finished vehicles is concerned, trying to anticipate what potential issues in the future might look like, so that we act upon them before they become an issue for our customers. That's probably good application. I think I see Leland is here. He was leading the effort for us, so he's nodding. He knows what I'm talking about. Yeah. But in a broader sense, and that's why I said it's important to talk about the title. I think just an interesting discussion with Sven before the meeting is, I think, what is really the role of leadership in this process? And I strongly believe it is let the next generation that is closer to this new technology, let them move on. Let them get loose. Let them try things out so that they can turn it into really game-changing things rather than replicating the way we've done business forever, just a little bit more efficient. I think the key is do it totally different.
Okay, and I'll go to Adam first before I come back to you. Adam, again, kind of joining the two kind of questions is, leading in the digital age, how do you do that? And then can you give an example of a recent success? Because I don't want, I'm hearing a lot of trends and phrases and buzzwords and things, but sometimes I want to see, some successes that have actually happened from thinking in that kind of way.
Sure. I kind of look at logistics, and I have this conversation, I actually had it at lunch, where I say we're not really doing anything different than what we were doing roughly 50 years ago. The goal is still the same. Mm-hmm. We may argue about what method, and we normally will look at technology to help us. So there's a great vision out there that says we want to be able to communicate seamlessly throughout the entire supply chain. So when we sell a unit, everyone within the supply chain can react to it. We're getting closer. We're using technology to help us, so we're much more responsive to those signals. We used to have those signals that may have been shared by using the telephone. Today, the telephone has changed pretty dramatically. I can remember 15 years ago, we talked about the ability to see the shop floor, to have a device that was very portable. We used to talk about it as the computer out on the shop floor, where we could see things and check on things. And we actually have that device. It's really the smartphone. We may not recognize that it's not so much picking winners or losers in technology, it's understanding what we want to be able to accomplish and having a clear vision. And that's where management is going to drive it. Picking where we're going to head in the future is very, very challenging. We have a good idea of where we think we're going to be, maybe in the next 5 years. If we talk about 20, 30 years from today, very, very difficult to know what it's going to look like. We make a lot of assumptions. We look at the past and say, what were some of those disruptive technologies that had a major impact? We don't always know. So a good example is we are doing some current testing on tracking and tracing of tooling through with GM in one of our facilities. We're able to use Bluetooth technology. We're able to use a smartphone, and we can physically go track a tool that's in the workshop. That's an example of using technology, but at the end of the day, we should know where that tool is at all times. We should have processes in place that we don't have to rely on. But the technology makes it easier when we don't follow our process.
Mm-hmm. Sven, so you advise and talk to people. So how do you see, what should leadership be in the digital age? What do you see people actually doing?
Yeah, what it should be and what people are doing is still a little bit of I'll say a moving target. We know what we should be doing, right? We're hiring all these young, smart people who are full of energy and life, and then we put the blinders on them, right? And said, here's how we've done it before. Here's how we've done it for the last 20 years. Go do, right? And so we put constraints on them. And I think, when I look at how are we going to make, not just incremental, but, grow by leaps and bounds. It's almost like putting just enough constraints where they don't fail too far, and then just letting them go, letting them be free. And I can give you some great examples of a success, and I'll take examples that we've done internally, not to our clients, just ours, right? When we set up, we have to do a lot of training. We have to do like 40 hours of training every year. So when we sign up for training, we have to book travel. So if you don't book travel 2 weeks out, the airfare goes up, which basically costs the firm a lot of money. And if you have 250,000 people worldwide, that's a lot of money. So one of the smart young seniors took a bot, RPA bot, and programmed it to go look at people's training registrations and then look at had they booked their travel for training or not. And 3 weeks in advance, it would send them a reminder. Hey, Sven, you haven't booked your ticket, and if you book your ticket now, you'll save the firm X dollars, because they'll do some spot checks on the pricing. So those are some of the creative ideas that we harnessed, and we've actually deployed RPA aggressively throughout Ernst & Young. Last year, we saved about $50 million in just the last quarter. This year, we are on target to exceed our goal of $200 million per year savings just from use of RPA. That didn't come from people like me. I don't even know how to use the bot. It came from young people who have great ideas, and they are given the opportunity to explore. They're given the opportunity to stumble a little bit, but they have a different mindset from what we have. And I think, after a certain number of years of experience, your brain gets trained to look at things in a certain way. So I think it's almost looking at the problems with a different paradigm, with a clean slate, and letting people innovate to create new solutions.
Okay. And of course, like I said, it is a Q&A, an interaction. So by all means, if you've got a question, raise your hand and wait for the microphone to come to you. So that was a good point about making sure we get the most out of the young people. But one of the discussions we had earlier today, the very first session was attracting people to the industry, and at all levels. We're not the companies we're competing with are global companies. They're successful companies. They're great brands often, and we've got to, or perhaps we have to get away from the perception that the Fords, General Motors, Volkswagen, Toyotas, all of the car makers are seen as kind of perhaps yesterday's companies, perception-wise now, and that the Amazons and Apples and so on look like tomorrow's companies. How do we make sure we attract this young talent to the automotive industry and make the best use of them? Because it is an issue attracting. And the reason this has been important to me is I've been to a couple of universities where they've had actual supply chain competitions, and I spoke automotive supply chain competitions. When I spoke to them afterwards, the winners didn't want to be in the automotive industry, even though they won automotive supply chain competitions. So how do we make sure we attract the right people? What do we do as an industry to attract the best talent to automotive, to Ford, and not to Facebook or Apple or Google?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's obviously one of the key questions here. How do you get talent into the industry? And there's probably two elements towards it. One is, first of all the car manufacturers trying to get into the world what's called mobility, right? Which is more let's call it more the sexy side of the world, which is trying to bring basically things to state of the art. How can you connect transport in a bigger city, for example? How does this all work? How does somebody get from point A to point B, needs to use a train, needs to use a taxi, needs to go, needs to walk, needs to do this. So that's clearly will attract people into the industry. On the other hand, I think our business has also got lots of opportunities. I think when you think about it, you cannot do it as we've done it all the time, because the whole focus right now in our business has been, how can we support the production line? It's 100% focused on this. We've streamlined this, I think, probably for the last 20 years, and everybody has done it more or less the same way, driving down inventories, and that's where it all finished. Not recognizing the amount of inventories we've got in our complete supply chain. If you really go to tier 2s, tier 3s, tier 4s, I think they hold phenomenal amounts of inventory to support our demands, and that's where the opportunity is. I mean, if you're only holding for the next 2 hours material at line side, I mean, you can try to get it to 1.8 hours, and that's very interesting. But you forget that somewhere out there, somebody holds months worth of inventory. So that's a kind of challenging we need to give to people, and thinking outside of the box. And first of all, how do I get there? I think our visibility of the supply chain, when you go beyond tier 1, I wouldn't say it's zero, but it's close to zero. And developing this complete view, I'm sure that would attract people. However, a really genuine challenge, not doing what we're doing today and just, typical tasks, try to do it 2% better. I think you mentioned RPAs, and we've also some experience with RPAs, and it's the improvements you see are phenomenal. I think we had I think one of the typical tasks we typically do is we try to validate the bill of material of future models. And that used to be just setting it up for a model that we built 5 years out was for a guy sitting in an office, a 2 to 3 months exercise. Goes through all the commodities, talks to engineering, does whatever he does. I think somebody has programmed a bot, and it took the bot 5 hours. And the job was done. And it only was highlighting the issues. I mean, that is the kind of things where you can see where people get extremely motivated because they do something completely different. And we need to enable this, that they can do something completely different. Otherwise, we will lose them. If we keep the office jobs more like 9 to 5 jobs, obviously we all work longer hours, but it's very rigid, it's all predefined. We've got our tasks, we've got our master schedule, there's the red, yellow, green meetings. I think we will lose our people. We will not attract the talent. But if we can break out of this, there's good opportunity. Because we're still a big industry. It's not like we are small.
Yeah. Adam, again, sorry.
Yeah. I think every organization is challenged with how do you attract great talent and how do you retain them. And generally it becomes a question of what does the organization want to be and how does it accommodate for each employee. Oftentimes in a union environment, we want to treat everyone exactly the same. The reality is that we're all snowflakes, we're all unique, we're all special, and we all have different needs on what we want out of an organization, even if it's a different experience. Some people want to be paid a lot of money. They will gravitate to those fields that pay well. Others want to have more flexibility in the workplace. They may want to have the creativity to bring about change in an organization. So we have to understand what people are looking for and make it available for them. If we don't, they will seek it from somewhere else. And again, we're all looking for very smart people. I've yet to run into anyone that said, I'm looking for the worst of the worst. We're all looking for the best of the best. But we also have to invest in training. We have to show them that we want them to succeed and have a path for growth. And oftentimes, as a manager, we kind of want to lock people into roles. Mm-hmm. We get very concerned about, well, they're really good at what they do, so I don't want to give that up. But we have to look at it and say, how can I make that employee better for the organization? Mm-hmm. How do I give them a path for promotion and advancement to take up something that they're very passionate about? You know, Sven mentioned it a little bit earlier when he was talking about, you know, people really want to be challenged. They really want to be part of something bigger. They want to be impactful. So the question becomes, you know, if you have someone new to your organization, how much do they need to learn the old way? Do you say to them, learn how we do it today, give you about 6 months to understand the process, and then I want you to blow it up. Tell me how to change this so that we're not doing something foolishly. Mm-hmm. Is there a better way of doing it? And ask that question on a daily basis. Is there a better way? We have to challenge our employees because at the end of the day, it's very simple. They have to be more productive today than they were yesterday, and they have to be more productive tomorrow. Otherwise, we won't be able to pay their salaries. And it's almost that simple. You have to figure out what the employees want, and are you an organization that is going to be flexible enough to provide that? It does matter whether you're talking about, I'll pick on Ford. If you're working on an assembly line, it's a shift operation. It's very, it's not 9 to 5, but it's very shift oriented. If you're in an office environment, there's probably more flexibility where someone may want to be able to have the flexibility to work from home. Someone may want to have different hours of the day. When you're global, you have to think about when are you having conference calls with Europe and Asia, as well as throughout North America. it's very different today, and the employee is looking for a lot of different things, whether it's from an experience standpoint or whether it's to go somewhere when they gain that experience.
I think Adam hit on really, really good points around flexibility. Flexibility, not just for individuals, but of the organization to understand how people want to operate and what do they want, and being able to have ability to let them have that room, right? I think you gave a really good example. Some people want to go work out at 4 o'clock. Olden days, even some companies now, you can't leave. If you go leave, you're perceived as somebody who's checking out early, right? Well, guess what? They're not done at 5 after they work out. They work out, they have their dinner, and then they're online from 8 o'clock till midnight, right? So it's a different way of working. I think the one thing that I do see, which is a strong theme, is people want to be driven by purpose. What is the purpose, right? Why am I doing this? And in fact, we as a firm decided to have a purpose for the firm, and our purpose is we want to build a better working world, right? And that's what we use, and we try to incorporate that in everything. And 20 years ago, when a senior consultant came into a project at an OEM, we would say, okay, here's what you have to do, right? And go do it, and they would do it, and they would not stop until they were done. Now, if you actually tell them, here's the purpose of the project, we want to, improve visibility in container management, and tell them, here's what I think you should do, but go figure it out. Let them explore, rather than, thinking that we know how it's been done, so they should follow this path and know how to do it. Giving them the opportunity to understand the purpose and then drive from that purpose. Yeah. I think that goes a long way these days in inspiring, because I feel like in digital age, the leadership has to be inspirational and aspirational. And there's a whole element of having resonance with your team. When you have resonance with your team results get amplified. Yeah. As soon as you start losing that resonance, you start to go from a high-performing team to maybe an average team. So it's really all about understanding the dynamics of the individuals. And this is where the job of a manager and a leader has become harder, right? Because it's no longer a cookie-cutter approach. It has to be really tailored to individuals. So I agree with you, Adam. You made some really good points around the flexibility.
Yeah. Okay. A quiet bunch today. Question from the young lady in the middle. Just wait for the microphone, please. Yeah. We'll just wait for the microphone for a second, please. And if you can say your name and your company name.
My name is Joelle Shade. I'm with Charger Logistics. And my question is kind of both along lines of something that you mentioned, Sven, and Adam as well. How do you mentioned encouraging ideas to come from other people, the younger people, but how is that message communicated down to them, to their level? Like, and it's where it's not just lip service, where we say that we're encouraging this, but we're actually, listening. So how do you communicate that message out in your groups?
So I think, and I'll take my personal example first, and I'll share broadly what we are starting to do. There's a difference between listening and hearing, listening to them and actually hearing them, right? And that's where they feel that you listened but you didn't hear. So even though you asked me for suggestions, you never really did anything with it. So the magic sauce there that I've been trying to apply is, if I get an idea, I need to stop myself from going to my own default and doing certain things in that way, but letting their ideas work through and say, okay, I like your idea. How about instead of following this project plan, we take your approach? Let's try it for a week, and if it works, great. If it doesn't work, come back to me and let's figure out the plan. So I think the difference is, in my mind, once you've received their ideas, actually incorporating them, piloting them, experimenting with them, and not just making a list of ideas and parking it. I think that's when they feel that you've actually heard and you tried and you implemented. And there's a little bit of a process of error and trial, right? And you will figure out that certain things work and certain things don't. But I think that's where we need to become more agile as organizations to attract the talent and retain the talent. If you're not agile and if you're not open, talent's going to go everywhere else.
I'll pick up on the point. It's as simple as taking action.
Yeah.
There's so many times we are almost placated with, we want to hear your ideas, whether it's from HR or even a manager. The old joke about we have an open door policy and the manager's door is closed. That is a physical barrier. It prevents good communication. It sends two different signals. But at the end of the day, it's about action. So it is about listening. It is about giving people the opportunity. It's about creating an environment when you say to your employees, even if I say no, if you believe in your idea, you should go and keep fighting for it. Don't let the first no or the second no stop you. And it's really about trying to create that dynamic where people want to make sure that they are involved. The younger generation, much more so, isn't going to wait 20 years so that they can be heard. They're saying, we've got great ideas. We look at the world a certain way. We want to make sure that our input is at least listened to. And it's our role as a manager to really think about that and not be afraid of it. There are some managers, unfortunately, that want to be the smartest person in the room at all times. And they feel that it is unprofessional to be shown up by someone younger. And again, it's about what kind of environment are you going to create to allow these ideas to come out. It's very important to understand what a brainstorming session means. It doesn't mean that I have an agenda that I'm going to railroad everyone down this path. It is basically saying, for the next period of time, whether it's an hour or a couple of hours, we're going to allow the group, wherever the idea may take us, to go down that path. Sometimes the best ideas aren't always the ones we start with. We may be looking here, and we find a solution over here for something different. Not necessarily a bad thing, but if you have a preconceived notion, you're going to really hamper the group in its creativity. And it happens every day. In my organization, I'm sure in others, people have the best intentions, but for whatever reason, it is easier to do what we're familiar with.
Yeah. Isn't there a fear factor, though? Because the things that, in logistics, you're really, really tight on so many things. Time, and really even more so on cost. So, you give some people a chance to come up with some new ideas, but there is the fear factor, even at a leadership level, to say that kind of sounds good, but it's a bit of a risk. Is that what the constraint is? It's not that we don't, you can encourage them, you can listen to them, but, I've got to fix this issue because, it's a $1 million issue.
Yeah, but I think the word leadership is probably already misleading, right? Because the word leadership means a leader is somebody who shows the way, right? That's the way we go.
Yeah.
And I strongly believe, I've seen so many examples recently with the younger generation. The best success were projects where I did not even know that they were happening, right? There was no control meeting whatsoever, and it was implemented.
Yeah.
I think we had an example of I've been with the company now 30 years and a little bit more than 20 years in logistics, and there was a cross-function issue we had. I think for at least 20 years. I think there have been executive meetings on this topic. Everybody was swearing this issue gets resolved, and in reality, it never got fixed. And then I've got a presentation from a group of graduates, actually, or former graduates, so 2-3 years with the company. They fixed the issue between themselves. And it's working. Has been executed on the last, I believe, 20 or 30 programs we've launched. I did not even know that it was fixed. Nor my peers knew that it was fixed. So, but that's a kind of leading means I tell the people, I know the right way. And we need to step back and assume we might not know the right way. We are the coaches of these people. We can help them with experience. We can tell them when they come with their proposals, well, sounds good. Have you thought about the following? But as soon as you start to tell them exactly how you should do it, you will not get the desired outcome. I'm strongly convinced that's the way it is these days. Because these people, the younger generation, communicates in a totally different way as we're used to be. They organize themselves on their own. They don't need here's the next meeting, I don't know how they do it, but I'm sure they don't do it through the way we do it by setting out Outlook meetings. I suspect that's not how it works. And because they know what to do. And the creativity that these people develop is enormous. And I strongly believe, I'm sure they're not smarter than people were before, but I think this tight control that we used to have, controlling exactly what's going on so that we know what's going on. So in case our senior leaders ask us, we can respond. That is really holding people back. And we need to change this culture. Otherwise, I'm absolutely convinced people will not join us any longer, because there's other organizations where it's working exactly like that.
Yeah.
That is not predefined. I think the person with the highest rank is the leader of this group. He sits in the front of the table, and he or she dictates exactly what's going on. I think there's no reason to believe that these roles can change over time. In Project A, I'm the leader. In Project B, somebody else is the leader. I mean, I do it myself. I think I've got a big conference room. I've got my chair, I think, with the name behind me. But that's not the way I think it will be successful in the future. And unless we change, I think we will lose the next generation.
Okay. And what about yourselves? Do you have time to think ahead? Again, time pressure, resource pressure, cost pressure. How much time can you allocate to the future? How much, we talked off record about blockchain and whatever it is. Do you have time to allocate to thinking these things and really trying to think, how can this help our company? Or do you think there's just been a flood in South Carolina and you're just too led by things like that? Do you make the time, force the time, allocate time to think forward?
Well, I mean, in principle, everybody knows that you're supposed to do it, and you might not do enough. I was lucky this summer, as you know, Germany got knocked out of the World Cup early, so I had a little bit more time to worry about this. But in reality, probably not, because we still have got too much. The way we operate at a senior leadership level is too much the old style. I think too many meetings, too much control. Too many consultants coming up.
Thank you.
And we don't find the time because, our day has also only got 24 hours. Or as I say to my team, you need to work 24 hours and the night. But in reality, I think we always say, yes, we need to find the time. Yes, we need to find the time. In reality, you're probably not yet there because and that's the thing, even at a little bit more mature stage, you need to learn of applying less control. And that's the only time you can free up time, because otherwise your schedule is full. My worst day I can remember ever was I had 18 meetings in a row, each half an hour. And meeting 13, I did not even know what they were talking about. you get confused at this. You need to find the time, but it comes back to the element of empowerment. Do I really need to be at this meeting? I think just having a full schedule doesn't mean that you're really adding value. That just means you're busy, right? Do I really need to be at that meeting? Or is it good enough that the person that is leading the effort is at the meeting? Why not trusting that he makes the right call? And typically you turn up because a more senior person is at the meeting, right? Well, can I let my department manager talk to the executive vice president while I'm not at that meeting? And the answer that I found for myself, why not? Why not? What makes believe, because in effect you're only there in case there is a problem, you can somehow mitigate it, and you know what's going on. Why not wait until the meeting is over, right? My manager will tell me, or my employee will tell me if there was an issue. Why can a salary grade person not talk to an executive vice president without the whole management chain being present? I don't think there's a reason for that.
Adam, again, I'm not skipping you. It's 'cause I like hearing from them and then hearing what you get as a trend. So, Adam.
I think it's a real interesting question as to what do we do with our time is probably more the question. We oftentimes are measured by how many hours and what are we doing. Rarely are we focused on the most important thing, which is what are the results. So where are we spending our time? Are we thinking, how do I make an improvement? Many of us probably do not do enough time really thinking. And for some of us that have that chance in our day-to-day life, that's what makes it a little bit easier. We're always thinking about the problem. We may have to solve it quickly today so that we can survive and move on to another day. But if we really break it down, it becomes a question of what is the problem? Is it going to be systemic? And how do I resolve it? And rarely have I seen a group of people be called into a meeting to say, we're going to solve this problem. And we've got an hour, and it's going to be solved in the best way possible. What normally happens is we plant the seed. We need to make an improvement on this. And we tell the group, we need you to think about this. Take a few days, think about it. At the end of the week, let's come together and see what we can do collectively on different approaches. And generally, all of us have pretty good ideas when it comes to making improvements. And I always joke and say, if I can take an idea that I have been working on, and I share it with 4 or 5 other people that may be cross-functionally, we can have an idea that's closer to 85 or 90% there, because now I have a different perspective on the overall problem that I'm addressing. So as an organization, we get very skeptical if we see someone sitting in their cube staring out the window. We look at that individual and say, why aren't they doing something? And that person may be thinking about the next brilliant idea to save the organization. And as a manager, again, it becomes a question of what behaviors are we trying to reinforce in our people. If we're constantly watching, what time did you show up at work? What time are you leaving? We're making judgments if people leave 5 minutes early, or say, wow, he must be a really dedicated employee because he's there till 8 o'clock at night, but in those 12 or 16 hours doesn't get anything accomplished. What are they doing? And again, it becomes a question of, if you want to push people, you have to drive for results, not just hours of showing up. And results mindset is more of being an entrepreneurial, spirited individual than a clock watcher. And that's where the change comes. If you ask people, what is your day like, and what do you get to focus in on, and what do you enjoy about your day? I guarantee you they're not going to say, I take this piece of paper, I put it in front of my desk, I hit a few keys, and I push it over here, and that really gets me excited. And again, whether we're talking about a clerical role or and I'll pick on Ford again, maybe it's driving lug nuts onto a wheel. They're going to look at that and say, in my mind, I'm 100 million miles away, because it's not engaging me in other ways besides my physical body. We have to engage people so they can use their creativity in order to drive the organization. And that comes from thinking, plain and simple. It's less about what are you doing, but what are you thinking about in order to make it better.
Sven, any thoughts on that?
I think one thing I see consistently across the organizations we work with is, tell me how you'll reward me, and I'll tell you how I'll behave. So, how do you use your time? Well, it's driven by how you're rewarded. Yeah. If you want to drive innovation, you can't look at how many hours that person is working. You have to evaluate that individual on quality of ideas and the number of ideas we generate. So I'm taking an example of somebody working in R&D, right? So setting up the right KPIs and performance measurements is pretty critical. And the challenge we see is, there is a standard template that gets applied, right? And as you do that, you're stifling innovation and you're stifling people's creativity. And instead of them being able to think about the future, what is the next requirement? What's the next thing that's going to leapfrog us from the competition? You just push them to work in the present. So I think, one way of driving more openly towards the future is aligning the performance measures and the metrics and incentivizing them to do the right thing. And one thing Adam mentioned earlier was not everybody is driven by money these days, right? That was the old saying was, well, tell me how you'll pay me and I'll tell you how I'll behave. Well, that's changed to tell me how you reward me and I'll tell you how I'll behave. So for some people, the reward is recognition. For some people, it's still money. For some people, it's allow me to work from home 3 days a week, right? So, understanding how we drive productivity and innovation from individuals to enable us to be ready for the future is pretty important.
Okay.
And I can only add to, I think, what you said, Sven, because the key word was quality of ideas. I mean, I can only go back in my own history, and I know we suddenly I was still in the plant, and we got the challenge. I think we need to come up, every plant needs in Europe come up with 10 improvement ideas, right? So I sat together with my team. Unfortunately, we came up only in one idea, which was we fundamentally changed the way how we received certain material, which I thought was a cool idea. And obviously, we failed on the target of the 10. And the person that won the prize was actually my counterpart in another plant. He found out that he could put into one box instead of 60 parts, 70 parts. So idea was, one was to get it from 60 to 61. Idea number 2 was from 61 to 62, and so on. So after a week, we had this review, and guess what? He was praised. I think I was not so good perceived. It comes back to it. And that's difficult. I think how do you really manage the quality of the idea? I think quantity everybody can do. I think I can put into a system 10 ideas and I can count them easily. But actually, first of all, it was only I think it was a nut or a bolt that he put in more, which I think probably has saved $5 freight throughout the year. So the quantity is easy to measure. The quality is difficult, I think, and that's where you really need to listen again to the people and think of, is this really a change to the way we do the business, or is it an incremental thing? I'm not saying the incremental thing shouldn't happen. I'm sure if our colleagues from Toyota would be here on the panel, let's say they're a strong believer in, and there's obviously a huge benefit in doing this. But the quality comes in. Have I really thought about, and we're talking about the digital age as an example, what is this technology enabling us? Just having technology doesn't help you, right? Just implementing all kinds of new technology doesn't get you anywhere unless you can see the purpose that you can achieve with this new technology. I mean, that's where everybody's jumping on this. I need to buy this technology, I need to buy that. And now you've got all the technology in the world, but at the end you ask yourself, why on earth am I doing that? I mean, I used the example yesterday in this ideas lab, and I think, we talk about artificial intelligence and we want to know this. Well, I mean, artificial intelligence on a truck that goes from an engine plant in Cleveland to Dearborn truck, I don't know what artificial intelligence will give you, right? The truck driver will drive from A to B at actually faster than he's allowed to do. I mean, that's not what it needs, but where is the solution? What problem am I really trying to address instead of first thing, I buy myself technology. And then I worry about, now I need to find the problems that I try to solve with it. I mean,
and that's a really good point, Matthias. And this is, when we are looking at sort of Industry 4.0 solutions, a lot of times we find that, companies will set, a group of brilliant people in, data scientists, PhDs in a room, give them a separate building and say, come up with ideas. Well, they come up with ideas, how do you use them, right? So instead of just saying, come up with ideas, giving them problem statements, right? Can you come up with ideas to solve business problem A, business problem B, business problem C, giving them that little bit of direction, because at the end of the day, we are measured on our business performance as companies and our return to shareholders. So, what are the areas we are having challenges in? And those are different by every company. If we allow them the freedom based on the business problem, we're going to get to a much better result, because they are then focused on helping us solve a problem which is going to drive, invaluable improvement in our performance. And that could be, well, I need to become more agile in how I assemble my vehicles. It could be, how do I reduce my changeover time from, one die to a second die? It could be, well, my customer demand is becoming much more volatile in terms of my option mix. How do I adjust my supply chain faster? Because at the end of the day, the component is different. A LED headlight is different from a xenon headlight, from a halogen headlight. They may actually go to 3 different suppliers. But if my supply chain is inflexible, I'm not going to be able to make it. So giving them that set of problem statements and allowing to be creative with that, creates a much better, result in the end. And I think that's where we've been advising a lot of clients is, instead of open-ended, digital supply chain innovation, focus it on where it's going to create value for you. Drive from business value, drive from where you need improvement.
Yeah, I like that proposition. So you've got 100 smart people, say the people in this room. Actually, no, say 100 Louis, okay? And you could give them one problem to solve. What would that problem be, Matthias?
What does it take Arsenal to win the championship? Sorry.
I said problems, not miracles.
Louis, a problem for Louis. What is the biggest problem? I think, I strongly believe the biggest opportunity in our business as far as cost is concerned, to better understand our complete supply chain. I think that's where the money is. It is huge. Nobody understands it. And it comes back to what Sven just said, is we need to formulate this as a problem statement rather than giving me the following analysis, which we basically sometimes misuse these data scientists by making them IT experts, right? They can do, we see them sometimes in the way of, they can do IT faster than anybody else. But that's not a data scientist. A data scientist, that's a smart IT person, right? A data scientist is, here's my business problem, and you tell me what value you can add in this process. And I've seen it in our world. Whenever we tried it the first way, yes, we got faster analysis than before, but the real value add comes, I think, when you give the problem statement. So that would be the challenge. I think, how do I get full visibility of my supply chain?
Adam?
I think in the supply chain area, it's probably today more what we'll refer to as visual management. And I think each link in that chain has a different view of what visual management is. And I think the challenge is where everyone has the same understanding so that they can ultimately use a system that's flexible enough, and it's irrelevant who the maker of the software is, that it can utilize that information and in essence, the data flow back and forth to be as seamless as possible. I think that's really, for me today, is probably the biggest challenge. Thinking down the road, I think the biggest challenge I see right now is where's the marketplace going and what's going to be the driver. There's a lot of fascinating ideas and technology that's right on the cusp. I'm wondering what the marketplace will decide is going to be the standard. It's creating a lot of challenges for management to understand where they're going to invest their dollars from an innovative standpoint. You know, we in the auto industry often talk about a couple of big things. We talk about big data generically. We talk about electrification in the automobile industry, and we talk about autonomous vehicles quite a bit. The challenge is going to be how long will it take to adopt? What are going to be some of the other dynamics? Because we live in a global dynamic world. It's not static. So the automobile industry isn't just dealing with the challenges within the industry itself. It has to look at how society in general is going to adapt to technology. What is it going to gravitate towards, even if we talk about where is it going to live? Is the city model going to replicate where people actually work and live? And if it does, it's going to change how we view mobility in order to get around. And I think the unknown is what makes it very, very hard. It is very difficult to think out 50 years. It's very difficult for those that are in senior management. I joke all the time and say they're probably going to be retired in 5 years. So they're thinking about how do I not hit the iceberg before I leave for my retirement. And I think at the same time, as funny as it sounds, they're probably not on the cutting edge of technology. And it's not a bad thing per se, but they're in a role of leadership where they have a lot of authority as to the vision of the organization, and their ability to see beyond the near term is potentially dangerous to the model. And it's very easy to see that we talk about speed. We talk about how fast can we implement change, how fast can an organization be flexible to the changing marketplace. What is the industry that we're in? You know, the great story, and for some of us that love history, you know, the railroad industry missed airlines. And what's the famous quote? Well, we're in railroads, right? Well, again, what is it that we do? Are we a car manufacturer? Are we a part supplier? Or are we something else? And probably the answer is something else. And we have to figure out what that something else is, or the marketplace may just bypass us.
Okay. And Sven, I'd like to switch back to the supply chain management thing, because that's your kind of area of expertise. What do you think supply chain management means to the automotive industry, and what should it mean? Is it different? Are we missing a trick somewhere here?
I think in many respects it needs to broaden out. You know, when you look at APEC's definition of supply chain, and if you look at other industries that are making rapid innovations such as life sciences or consumer products, who are dealing with expectations of people like us, of everything being like Amazon, they look at supply chain from everything from strategy to plan, make, which includes R&D, move, buy, and service. So the definition of supply chain outside of automotive industry is broader. And that allows companies to innovate and accelerate the entire end-to-end. Whereas mostly in automotive, we see that procurement, which is buy, and manufacturing are pulled out. And a lot of times supply chain just means planning and fulfillment. And even strategy is not in there. That's somewhere in long-term planning, which includes footprint management and things of that sort, right? Portfolio management. So, by having split up the true end-to-end supply chain into multiple boxes and shortening what supply chain means certainly has had some restricting effect on how quickly the end-to-end supply chain can innovate. Because if I need to be more agile and responsive to my customer, and that's my goal, but procurement is not a part of it, they're buying for the lowest per piece price. And they might be buying 10,000 units at once with a minimum order quantity of 5,000 units or 10,000 units because that's the lowest per piece price. And oh, by the way, the lead time is 16 weeks. But that doesn't align to where I want to go. I want a lead time of 3 days. I want a minimum order quantity of 100 because that allows me to be flexible, agile, and responsive. So, having that procurement and manufacturing kind of pulled out of, I'll say, in most part, the definition of supply chain, that's certainly limiting in how we can innovate.
But then, I totally agree. I think think about the automotive industry. And when you think about inventory, what is the highest inventory level we've got is finished vehicles, right? Yeah. There's, I don't know, depending where you are in the cycle, in which part of the world you are, our dealers are holding 70, 80 days worth of inventory. Well, they sell every day, one day. I think I'm simplifying this, but they sell the equivalent of 1 day worth of inventory. Why do we keep billions and billions of dollars of inventory in the system? Exactly because we don't have this holistic view. Yep. We don't know exactly what the customer wants, because if we could project it, well, when the customer want to have a specific vehicle, right? If this vehicle is on the lot, he's happy. He doesn't want to have the other 80 days, not only his, but 80 days of whatever other customers turn up on this day. He's not interested in this. And in order to do so, you need to be very, very flexible and have a more holistic view. You need to understand trends early on that are happening in the industry. I mean, it's obviously in North America, but think about what's currently happening in Europe. I think diesel demand is in free fall. So, was it really a surprise, as it looks like? Think about the way we organize our inbound logistics. Was it really a surprise that the freight rates were exploding in North America? How all the external experts are suggesting us? I think basically the forecast for this year was, okay, there's an increase, okay, but not dramatically different from prior years. Well, suddenly it's not 2-3%, it's 15%, 20%. Drivers don't exist, truck drivers don't turn up. Is it really such a big surprise? I always come back to my iPhone. I think for whatever reason it knows when I leave the office that, no, I'm not working that long because I've learned that's no good. when I leave at around the time I typically leave, it knows that I'm going home. Well, it has learned it somehow. So I don't think that we make use of all the data that are around us to the extent we need to look at it, because and I agree what Sven said, because we too much focus on our particular part of the business. I think logistics is try to fill the truck. But is this really the best strategy? Does it really give me the flexibility? Yeah, it's good for inbound freight, for sure, right? But is it good for the plant? Is it good for the customer? I don't think this holistic view exists in the automotive industry. One of the reasons is because it's extremely complicated, right? You've got customers all over the world that you're supplying. Demand is shifting all over the place. You want to keep the production plant at a flexible, at a fixed schedule, basically, which in itself is a contradiction because the demand is obviously not fixed. So there's lots of opportunities you can develop, and I think you need to develop because the customer is expecting it. I think the time where the customer is compromising on specification I don't think that might work to a certain extent if you can give them money, which we do, which is called variable marketing, which is a big amount of money we spend, right? And that's what we need to get our head around instead of just saying, well, how can I optimize a route from supplier A to supplier to one of my plants?
Yeah, I think that, Matthias, you make a really good point, which is, there is so much information out there, and we haven't had a chance to fully use it, right?
Yeah.
And, my phone as well knows how long it's going to take me to get from, where my next appointment is, Somehow it scans it through my emails and whatever, right? And we have so much capability now using AI or machine learning to create better demand forecasts, right? But we're not using that capability, right? We are still sticking with our old traditional forecasting models in most cases. And I think the other difference I feel where we are struggling is we are not really allowing the creation of a demand-driven supply chain. A lot of industries, like specifically, I'll say consumer products, have really moved towards demand-driven supply chain, right? Let me understand and create the products that my customers want. And then my variable marketing goes down, right? Right, Matthias?
Sure.
My variable marketing goes down, my days on lot goes down, all my, cross-regional shipments go down because I'm actually understanding what my customers want and I'm creating and producing what they want rather than, what I can make. I mean, it's simple. A customer can't buy a car an OEM didn't produce.
Yeah.
So they have to pick from what's available versus being able to order or get exactly what they want. They do in the US about 15 to 20% is orders, but that's about it.
But I do think, you were talking about the mobile phone apps, I think analog can work just as well as digital. Because say your mobile app tells you when you're going to be and where you're going to be. Well, I kind of have analog at home. My wife will say, you should have been here 20 minutes ago. So I think sometimes analog can work as well as digital, in fact often more efficiently than digital. Just any questions out from the audience? Okay, just a couple more from me, I think, is with all the trades and tariffs in Europe, with Brexit and things that happen here in China and America and Europe and so on and Mexico, are you building contingency plans for what might happen? Can you build contingency plans for what might happen?
I think, here in the US, it goes rapidly that these tariffs get implemented. I think in the morning we decide what's happening in the afternoon. I don't think anybody can, most of the time probably on Twitter, but that you cannot really respond immediately to these type at the speed because you can't change your supply chains immediately when you just take a straight hit. What else can you do?
Yeah.
Brexit is probably a little bit different in Europe because obviously it's has been announced for a long time. Unfortunately, although we're heading towards it, nobody has really announced how it gets implemented. So you need to do scenario planning between a hard Brexit, which basically means I think there's no agreement. We just introduce it with tariffs, which would be horrible, because I think the customs brokers that you need at that point in time are not yet even born. So that will be a challenge, but you need to plan for it. Obviously, you can if something is happening. But was it Monday or when was it when the latest tranche of when you can only calculate the impact and inform the system.
Yeah.
But the question is then, and it comes back to the predictability, and I'm not sure whether artificial intelligence will help us, is even if you come now with revised sourcing footprints, I think you need to have more the view what will happen in 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And that's obviously a real challenge for anybody. It probably will start with who's going to win the next election. So, and that's difficult. But tariffs is one of the clearly one of the key drivers for cost right now in the business.
Yeah.
And
Adam, are you,
Yeah,
I mean, you're a Canadian, kind of based company and so on.
We are. So Magna is a Canadian-based company. The impact of the recent tariffs has an estimated impact of about $60 million. I guess the short answer is, how much time do you have? And I don't mean that in how much time do we have to talk about it. I mean, how much time do you have to plan and anticipate for a change? So if you ask many of us, when the new administration went into office, which was almost 2 years ago, it was talked about, America first. We weren't sure what that meant. For business, the uncertainty is what causes volatility in the marketplace. It makes it very, very difficult when you do not know what the signals are and are they clear. If the administration said today we're going to raise tariffs by some percentage, 2-3 years down the road, many of the organizations would quickly formulate a plan to adjust to that. If it happens tomorrow, you don't have time to react. In the auto industry, because of validation periods, because of oftentimes sole sourcing, it is very, very difficult to switch horses, switch regions in order to minimize that impact. We are currently trying to figure out what we can do in other areas to maybe mitigate or minimize that exposure. And I think that's what most organizations, when there is a sudden or a rapid change, try to do. So that's why I kind of joke and say, how much time do we have?
I think Anna hit on really good points. I think you have to really think about how much time is it going to take to create new capacity? Because at the end of the day, you're getting parts. You can't just make that part anywhere else, right? If you're going to make it, let's say, in a different country, you have to have a supplier who is capable. You have to have the availability of raw materials. You have to have tooling that is fit for use with the equipment and the environment over there. And then you have to have trained staff to operate in that country. So you have multiple factors. If you had to start from a greenfield, you're looking at least 2 years before you can have a validated part available. So the minimum change time is 2 to 3 years, assuming you have access to unlimited capital. And that's one of the other constraints. So, it's not that easy to move supply chains around, especially because the supply chain, automotive supply chain, has become much more global than ever. 20 years ago, you had 5 global platforms and 25 regional platforms. Now you have almost the other way around. You have 25 global platforms and maybe 5 regional platforms for unique things, such as big trucks, pickups in US, or small, ultra small cars for Asia, right? You'll have those unique requirements of the region, but you'll have common platforms across. So you have common platforms, you have a common supplier base, and you're actually managing your capacity globally, right? And it's no longer that I can take something out from one country and not affect the rest of the world. As soon as you start to pull here, you're going to start to feel your purse strings hurt in another region. So the automotive supply chain, by design, have become more global and hence more susceptible to disruption in a region. So I don't think it's easy at all to adjust your supply chain based on tax and tariffs. Specifically when there is so much volatility. That Matthias mentioned is, how quickly is it changing, and what may happen tomorrow, right? There might be another change. So that's the other problem is you can't really plan. You can run simulations to see what's going to be the impact. Yeah. Is it going to be 60 million? Is it going to be 100 million? Is it going to be 200 million? What kind of a buffer do I need to create? What kind of expectations do I need to set with the market and with my stakeholders? And how do I need to prepare myself? Because if I'm going to have $200 million deficit from my plan, I really have to change my plan for next year. So I think you can do some preparation and analysis around scenario modeling, but you can't flex your supply chain that fast.
I think you mentioned the point. 2 years is probably good horizon, and well, are you changing something that you'll be able to implement in 2 years, not knowing within 2 years is it still in place? So
that's a good point.
that makes it extremely difficult, I think, and volatility. I think, I mean, the strangest things that has happened probably in this period was in China. I think where the tariffs for imported vehicles went from 25%, I think, to 15% for 1 week, and then went up to 40%. So I'm sure nobody changes the sourcing footprint of his vehicles within a week, right? It doesn't go like that, and that's the uncertainty. It makes really run the business effectively very, very difficult because nobody can really project. It's like playing in a casino. I think because it takes so long to change the supply chain is you need to come up with an assessment. Not how does it look like today or tomorrow, how does it look like in a year or maybe 2 years' time? And that's totally uncertain.
Yeah, and in addition to that, closer to heart, what about the logistics of transporting parts, right? You can't add, capacity in the market that easily. You can't, create more ships overnight. You can't create more containers and more docks and more ports. All of those are like physical constraints which cannot be addressed quickly.
And that's why I mentioned, I think, the Brexit as an example. I think it's really, and it has been studied, I think if it comes in a hard way, a tariff comes up and you need to go through customs brokers, there's simply not enough customs brokers to do it. I mean, they simply don't exist, these people, because there was no need for these people in the past, and you kind of just breed them overnight.
A question: what disruptors to your industry, your sector? What disruptors are you really looking forward to, and which ones are you scared of? I'll start with Sven on this one.
Me, okay.
Yeah.
I think well, let me talk about. If you said my industry, I think I have two industries. One is consulting, one is automotive. Let me tackle a little bit of both. In consulting industry, we are looking at how people are thinking differently about projects. Do we go to a global model where you can have consulting on demand, right? So that's one of the big disruptors which we're thinking about. The other thing is, how is audit going to change over the next decade? And using RPA and other technologies, do you not need 50 people on an audit? You only need one who can monitor the exceptions and manage the exceptions. So that's quickly the consulting world. From a closer to heart, automotive. I think it's pretty exciting to see sort of the amount of energy that's going into how do we address the convergence of electrification, autonomous, and shared economies, right? Shared economy. So the convergence of that. So there's a lot of enthusiasm and energy going into it. And we're seeing every day our clients split up a division just so that they can be free of the organizational barriers and I'll say inertia, where they can spin really fast. So the disruption, I'm excited about is seeing, how we can change the way we work. Meaning, instead of being able to create a new vehicle in 5 years, can we get to a point where we can create a new vehicle in 18 months? That's, to me, is the biggest disruption I'm excited about, is how fast can we change our vehicle product life cycles. So that's pretty exciting, because guess what? A lot of other industries do it. So that's the one I'm excited about. I think, you know, the scary one is we are disrupting our traditional supply chains, and we are using new materials which are in pretty short supply. Imagine if tomorrow we produced 50 million electric vehicles. Where am I going to get the lithium from? And if I take all the lithium for cars, we're not going to have any more cell phones. So, you know, I think those are the kind of disruptions which make me think, okay, are the supporting industries ready for that? You know, where are we going to get the metals and minerals? Where am I going to get so much magnet that's going to power the electric engine? So those are the things that, you know, keep me up at night sometimes.
Okay. Adam?
I think what's part of the exciting aspect is what we refer to as technology and innovation. And for the longest time, we assume that it's a very positive outcome. So that's what's exciting, that you know, the future isn't set yet, and we'll see how it shakes out. And generally speaking, we expect things to be better, society to function better as well. On the disruptive side, I think what I worry about is we may not be ready for all this innovation and what the impact is to the average citizen. What we don't talk about is, as we get more and more lean, more and more efficient, we saw what robotics have done to manual labor. You can take a very simple process that you used people before and replace it with automation. We are right on the cusp of seeing that same technology through better use of AI and computer software replace a lot of overpriced clerks in the world. What I most worry about is our society is based on, for lack of better words, I give hours, I get money, now I can go spend and live in society. If tomorrow the unemployment rate becomes 50 or 60%, because these people are not actively engaged, how will society treat that? And do we devolve into anarchy? So while we assume technology is good, except for some of the sci-fi movies, like Terminator and things like that, it really begs the question of, is society ready to make major structural changes in how we view what's happening today? Change is what scares everybody, because suddenly we don't have the control over it. We think we've learned the rules of the game, and suddenly the rules change. And that's what makes people very anxious, very nervous. It makes it very difficult for an individual business to figure out what those changes are going to be and how to react to them.
Matthias?
I think obviously the hardware will change, that's a given, right? It will go to autonomous, it will go to electrification, that's a given. And I strongly believe that all the OEMs will more or less at the same point in time will be getting to the same level. The challenge, I think, is what is the other changes that the customers want to demand. And I think you need to accept whatever we believe this new world will look like Adam and Sven have said, our current assessment will be wrong. And therefore, we need to be able, and it comes back to what Sven says, we need to be much faster to respond to change of customer demand. We might have an image of what we believe the customer might expect, but it will rapidly change. And it's not only in the autonomous world. You see it probably in markets like China today. I think where you've got a much younger workforce that drives vehicles, I think they rapidly expect something else. And if you go to the traditional way of developing cars, where you've got the wonderful, you develop the model, You do a mid-cycle action somewhere in between, which is more or less just cosmetic, and then 6-7 years later, you come with a new model. That will not fulfill the demand. And there will be companies, the companies will win, that can change this life cycle, change of change demand. I think I saw an example, I think a vehicle in China that is responding to your emotions, right? It shows you a different display. I mean, it sounds like it just happened. Boom. If you can't replicate this quickly, you will lose customers in China. And the same will happen in autonomous, because in all fairness, I think nobody can really imagine what people will do in autonomous vehicles. What is their expectation? You know, how does it really work? I mean, I don't believe that people will own autonomous vehicles. That's not how it will emerge. I think it will be a service that is provided to them. So, but what does a service look like? Right? Am I sharing it? Am I not sharing it? Have I got a choice? Can I listen to my music? Can I look to videos? Can I push a button? Sorry, Leland, that I pick you again. I don't want to drive with Leland, but with Sven. I mean, how will this all come about, I think, and how can I have then the technologies that supports really the purpose of this vehicle is you can drive it wherever you want, whenever you want. It just turns up, and there will be features evolving that we have not heard about. Yeah. I mean, we don't even know that they exist because nobody has asked for it, but somebody will develop it, and people will want to have it on your vehicle. So how do you develop platforms that are capable to change rapidly to these demands? Second big change is, how do you redefine it? I think Adam said this, what is your role in the future? Are you the hardware supplier? Or are you moving towards, which everybody's trying to do, also provide the services, because that's where the money is. I mean, the hardware is a hardware. It's like everything. Yeah. The hardware is the cheapest part of everything, right? The hardware of an iPhone, I don't know what the cost is, but it's probably not more than $1,000, make it this way. So I think that's the kind of thought process that every company is probably currently undergoing, and comes back to your ability, and it closes probably also the loop on how you can get the younger generation energized. I think you need to show them that they're part of this process. That's why all the companies are spinning off organizations that are not so tied in the traditional way of doing business. I think people can get energized by working in a different environment, developing things completely different.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I think that's a good end to the session there, looking at the great possibilities of the future, but also sharing some of the concerns of what the future brings. So first of all, I'd like to thank the panel for their honest comments and being a great panel there. Thank you very much. So just really to round up after the conference, I hope you've had a great two and a half days, starting with the golf and the Motown tour. Hopefully you've enjoyed the 2 days of the conferences, the sessions, and of course the opportunity to interact with each other, because that's the most important thing. I hope you enjoyed some of the events that we put on for you. I think my team, Lauren, did a fantastic job with the gala dinner last night at the Opera House. Really was a great event, and really highlighted, and the Sergera Afterglow party, as I've said a couple of times, it really highlighted, the Detroit, the heart of the automotive industry, the kind of the slump it went through, but how Detroit is possibly the future of the automotive industry too, and that's reflected in the wonderful city that Detroit has once again become. So I hope you enjoyed all of that. It was certainly an eye-opener for me. As we said before, you've got the evaluation forms on the tables in front of you. Please complete them. They're very important to us. We do take them very seriously. So our conferences are your conferences. We try to organize what you want. So please share your opinions with us. You can use the app to complete the evaluation forms. So do that if that's your preference, if you're in the digital age or whatever they call it now. I also want to talk once again, just briefly, about Truckers Against Trafficking. That was, you heard the presentation last night and saw the video about what, the logistics industry. We talk about what the logistics industry can do to the automotive industry and so on. But last night was a real, real eye-opener on what the logistics industry to reduce trucking or reduce trafficking through truckers against trafficking and real impact on people's lives. So that was, it really was an eye-opener. So again, if you haven't heard of them, if you didn't see them at the gala dinner, if you didn't see their materials, please Google them. It's an organisation where we, the automotive industry, can really, make a huge difference to what's happening in the industry, what's happening in this world. I don't know if you've got any evaluation forms. If you can just let our staff know, you can hand them in at the registration desk, or put your hands up and we'll collect them, or whatever it is. I also think, kind of the message at the end about, it's kind of the theme was the human factor. We talked about how we, whatever it is, I was going to say our generation, but most of you are older than me, but a few who are younger than me, what we can do, but also how we change the automotive industry of the future. And it seemed, about energizing the young people and making them excited about the automotive industry. They're going to be the buyers of the cars, they're going to be the users of the cars if they're sharing them or whatever is happening, and they're going to be the future of our industry. So it's in all of our interest to make sure we can energize the young people to be excited once again about the automotive industry. I'd like to thank all our sponsors for supporting the conference, and I hope you all had a chance to see them, to visit them, meet their people, or visit their stands. If you look at the app, you'll find all the company names there. If you didn't have a chance to see them, please visit their websites. I will give a special mention to Ryder, because they've been our premier sponsor for 19 years in a row from the very first conference we've ever done. But other than that, although this is the Automotive Logistics Global Conference by name, we do have conferences all around the world. I'm not even sure if I can remember what they are anymore, but the next ones coming up are UK, which is unusual. After many years, we're finally doing a conference in the UK. After that is a new conference in Eastern Europe. After that is South America, which is in Brazil. Then January is Mexico. March is the Automotive Logistics Supply Chain Conference, where we start moving towards the supply chain model that you were talking about earlier in this conversation. April is Automotive Logistics China. Later on in April, it's a new date for the Finished Vehicle Logistics North America Conference. Then what happens after that? June is Automotive Logistics Russia, which is hopefully going to be launched back. We didn't run it this year because of the World Cup, and we knew that a lot of Germans come to that, and we knew they would be sad during the conference. So we skipped the Russia conference this year, but we're bringing it back for next year. July will be our Automotive Logistics Europe conference, which is going to be in Munich next year. In August is a Finished Vehicle Logistics Import-Export conference in Baltimore probably. And then September, we'll be back here in Detroit for Automotive Logistics Global. We're already planning some changes to encourage the next generation to join the conference, working closely with local universities, probably having some kind of career day at the same time as the conference to encourage students to come and for you to meet some of the students out there. Any other ideas on what we can do to make the conference better for you? Next year is our 20th conference, so anything, any ideas to make it even more special and add more value to whatever we can do, please let us know. But that's just the conference. We do the magazines. Any ideas you've got for editorial comments, opinions that you want to share with us, our online platforms, again, anything our job is to be a kind of a medium of communication for your industry. So any ideas that you've got on what we can do to help you, please let me or any of the great team, please let us know. But otherwise, I'd like to thank you very much, all of you, for everything, for the last 2 days, the way you've all really taken part in the whole event. And we look forward to seeing you somewhere in the world in the next 12 months, and at the very least back here in September 2019. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.